theyeshiva.net.
We're up to page Memtes, closer to the bottom of the page. The line starts, Ki im hi madrega hal yenu shaba b'koychein tzarf b'akshama. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 13 lines from the bottom. 13 lines from the bottom, page Memtes, in this Maamar of Yadaita Moskva, Tofresh Nun Zayin. So a communicator must often employ a mashal or many mashalim, metaphors, illustrations, parables, stories, allegories, in order to illustrate and bring forth and convey a message and an idea that it should be able to be absorbed and understood and appreciated in the mind and in the heart and in the soul of the pupil, of the makabel, of the recipient. And for this task, the mentor, therefore, must diligently recalculate how he or she communicates. Not only is it important that the idea itself be conveyed in an appropriate way, tailor-made, custom-made, restricted, mitigated, and sometimes diluted, or often diluted, for the mind set and the unique chemistry of the student or students. So it's not only, but that's the number one, where the idea itself has to be mitzumtzum, eclipsed and curtailed and veiled. But in addition to that, there's a need for an extra garment, which is a mashal, where you transport, you're not even discussing the idea, so to speak, you're going into a new discussion, which is what a good mashal is. It takes the student out of the actual discussion, and you're dealing with seemingly a new topic, but of course, only seemingly, because really it's a mashal that's going to bring him or her back to the nimshal. And yet, despite all of these concealments and restrictions, it's only from the perspective of the students. It's never from the perspective of the teacher. Because the teacher, of course, sees within the mashal the nimshal. And even within the restricted information, he sees the full breadth of the information. So when it says that you have to teach your student b'derech tzara in a brief and concise way, it's a type of kitzer that contains within itself, the entire depth and length and breadth of the concept, like the Mishnah contains within itself the entire Gemara, even though it's in a concealed way. And from the teacher's perspective, he can see in the brevity the full depth of the idea. In every mashal, he sees the depth of the nimshal that he's trying to convey through the mashal. And he gave a mashal that in Pnimiyus HaTorah Nister, the Eretz, the physical planet, our physical earth, is a mashal, it's a metaphor for what we call Malchus, the quality of Malchus. There's Malchus of Atzilus and Malchus of Bria, Malchus of Yitzirah, and what that means is, as we explained, that all of its physical properties, and that means all of the physical properties, including its thickness, including its shape, including its force of gravity, its weight, including its reproductive powers, etc., etc. In other words, any type of feature is essentially a mashal, a metaphor that can allow you to glean more awareness to understand the nimshal, which is the divine energy known as Malchus of Atzilus. And it's not just a mashal, and that's the key, that can explain it, but rather the mashal is an evolution of the nimshal. It's not that there is earth and there is Malchus of Atzilus. Earth is Malchus of Atzilus, the way it assumes a physical incarnation. And this is therefore what allows the person to appreciate not just an explanation of spirituality, but to be able to see the integration and the oneness of everything, of the Ruchni and the Gashmi, the spiritual and the physical together. That's what he says. So after the parentheses, in the earth he sees in the earth a mashal as a nimshal. Shebe'emes ha-mashal va-nimshal im davar echad. Really, the mashal and the nimshal are one. Ela shezeh ruchni v'zeh gashmi. This is just ruchni and this is gashmi. That's the key. It's not that it's two separate universes, And the mashal is just, I give a good mashal so you can get what I'm saying. That's a mashal often that we bring. You want to illustrate an idea, so you illustrate it. Sometimes it's meticulous, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's precise, sometimes it's not precise. When you're talking about the mashal of Gashmias for Ruchnias, it's really one. It's just here it assumes a spiritual manifestation which makes it intangible. It's nebulous, it's heavenly. And earth allows me to be able to see the Ruchni through the Gashmi. So it's not two separate things. It's really one and the same. It's the way the spiritual assumes a physical incarnation. It's Bahakshama, but it's really that same Teuchen, that same Pnimiyus, the way it's manifested through the physical Levush. So therefore it's not two separate things. It's mamash the same thing. The mashal and the nimshal are mamash the same thing. Even though from the mashal's perspective you could differentiate, you may not see the nimshal in the mashal. That's true. That's true. That's why on one level it's a levush, because you want the person to be able to understand it, so it comes into the mashal. There's always the danger that when you see the mashal, you won't see the nimshal. But in truth, the mashal and the nimshal is one thing. Just this has a lavush ruchni and this has a lavush gashmi. This doesn't have a lavush and this has a lavush. And therefore, the receptive mind, from the mentor's perspective, he sees all of the nuances of the nimshal in the mashal. Since it's really the same, so whatever exists in the nimshal is going to come out in the mashal, because it's not two separate realities. The physical planet is not just a mashal as a detached mashal, it's a manifestation. So whatever is in the source is going to come out in the mashal. Every detail of the mashal is going to be consistent and reflective of the nimshal, because it is the nimshal. V'hainu re'iyas alakus b'muchash. And this is what allows the perception of godliness in a very real way. When a person stops differentiating between the mashal and the nimshal, stops separating between the two and understands that there's nothing in the olam hagashmi, there's nothing in the physical world and in the physical life on any level which you are observing or studying or seeing that is not a mirror and a reflection of divine energy. Just here, this aspect expresses this truth, and this aspect expresses this truth, but it's all a mashal for a nimshal. And this is what allows the re'iyah of Elikus to be b'muchash. To be muchash means real, practical, because the physical world I can see.
But ultimately, it's four different realities, right? All Masiya or Atzilus, it's different reality. It's not the same, right?
Are those all different Mashalim? That's also not the source.
It's all Mashalim. You're asking, aren't Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, different realities? And here we're saying it's one reality. Like a Nimshal and a Mashal.
Do you say it's like looking at something with colored glasses?
Yeah.
Same thing, but it's just...
It's all, is it more like augmented reality where, we just don't see it? We
Right.
have an instrument?
If the Mashal could become fragmented from the Nimshal, and one doesn't see it for what it is. There's the old story about 4 blind people who were all given a big object, right? And everyone decided it was something else. This one decided it was a tree, and this one decided it was a beam, a pillar. This one decided it was a counter, a plank of wood, and it was an elephant. And each one, grasped a certain dimension, and from his perspective or from his sensation, this was an accurate description. But it was a fragmented description. In other words, they couldn't appreciate the full picture, and therefore it became something else than what it is. There's a beautiful explanation of the Shalah. The Shalah HaKadosh, Rabbi Yeshaya Horowitz writes in his Sefer Shalah Shnei Luchos Abris, in a section called Asar Maamaris. He discusses there the big question of the Rishonim a whole very long section. Why there's no explicit mention of Olam Haba in Tanakh? In Chumash, whenever Hashem promises rewards to the Jewish people for behaving, or to the world, it's always material rewards. In B'chukaisei Teilechu es mitzvayse tishmaru, v'nasati geshmeichem be'ita, v'nasnaretz yevula v'etz asadi yitim period. Both the rebuke and the rewards always revolve around the land, prosperity, health, life, completely about this world. You would expect at least one verse to say, and by the way, when you die, there's a big afterlife waiting. Not a mention. Yeah, there's a remez here, and a remez there, and a remez here, but all remez. In Gemara and Medrash and Chazal, the concept of Olam Haba is explicit and frequent. But even the word Olam Haba is nowhere to be mentioned, nowhere to be found in Tanakh. There's a world, there's a soul that doesn't die. After this world, there's a whole other experience. It's one of the very interesting questions that Rishonim ask. Chovos HaLevavos has 10 answers for this. Because some said, so you see, Judaism doesn't believe in an afterlife. Just believes in this world. So there's a lot of different, the Rambam discusses it, and the Ramban, and the Ritva, and there's many Rishonim explore this at length. The Chovos HaLevavos, I told you 10 reasons for this. The Shalah gives a very interesting reason. And he introduces a Gemara. The Gemara says, in Masechta Sukkah, Daf Chav Ches, that Hillel HaZaken had 80 students. The oldest, the senior one, was Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel. And the youngest was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, of course, lived through the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, and he was considered the youngest student of Hillel the elder, Hillel HaZaken, who lived a century before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Yonasan ben Uziel, they used to say that when he would learn, every bird that would fly over him would get burnt. About Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, they said that lo yiniach davar gadol v'davar katan. His scholarship was so expansive. He knew the language of animals. He knew the language of trees. He knew kala Torah kula. And it says he didn't leave go of a big thing and of a small thing. What's a big thing? Ma'aseh Merkava. He knew Ma'aseh Merkava, which is what we spoke about yesterday. Arba nichnasu lepardes, the 4 people who entered into the orchard. The whole world of mystical reality. Merkava is the chariot that Yecheskel HaNavi saw about the divine and the angels and the higher worlds and the Kisei HaKavod, etc. What's Dover Cotton? So the Gemara says, Havayas da Abaya v'Rava. All of the sugis of Gemara and Mishnah that are known as the discussions of Abaya and Rava, because this was their sole main occupation in life, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't neglect that either. Of course, he lived much earlier than Abaya and Rava, but the Gemara means Davar Katan is that he knew the whole system of Pilpul and Halach and all the intricacies and the explanations and the proofs and the sources and so forth. So the Rishonim ask, how is it that the Gemara, none other than the Gemara, calls the whole Shas and Poskim, what we call Havayis D'Abaya v'Rava, Davar Katan, a small thing. The Ritva says, the Rambam says, this is what Jews have been doing for thousands of years. This is what their main involvement is, to learn Torah, to understand Torah. It's what they do in all the yeshivas. For decades and decades, Jews dedicated their whole life, and at the summation, you say, it's Davar Katan. It's a small thing. Havayis D'Abaya v'Rava. And the Gemara says this, none other, it's not somebody, some stranger, about who Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. This was the small thing of his life, an understanding of the whole world of Nigla. So the Shalah, so there's different explanations. Many of them are not very satisfactory. The Shalah gives the most, Shalah gives a very powerful explanation, and it resonates. And he says we read the Gemara wrong. Davar Gadol Ma'aseh Merkava. Davar Katan Havayis D'Abaya v'Rava. The great thing is the chariot, the system of spirituality, which is the world of Kabbalah, basically. Pnimiyus HaTorah Nister. Sefer Yetzirah, Razi Malamalach, Sefer Haboyer, Zohar, these types of texts. And then you have Davar Katan Havayis D'Abaya v'Rava, is what we call Torah's HaNigla. Mishnah, Gemara, Shas, Poiskim, Rishonim, Achrayim. Obviously, in Rebbe ben Zakkai's days, you didn't have not Mishnah, not Gemara, but the seed of it all, the concepts of it all, you had even more, perhaps. So he says we see it as two separate things. That's not what the Gemara meant. And he gives an example. Today we can appreciate how accurate the example is. He says you look up at night and you see a star, and you ask your child, how large is that star? Or remember when you were a child, you didn't know much about astronomy. How large is that star? I don't know. It looks like a marble, maybe an apple, maybe a cherry. Okay, maybe a little larger. And how far is it? It's not too far. And what's the distance from that star to the other star? Oh, it's just probably just a 5-minute walk. A 5-minute walk. Maybe you need a helicopter and it'll take 10 minutes from one star to another star. And of course, when you study and you get to know the truth, some of these stars, many of these stars are not only larger than Earth, not only larger than the sun, but some of them are millions, and sometimes billions of light years. And remember what a light year is. Light travels 186,000 miles per second. Millions and billions of light years, and that's why they're so small, because our eye simply doesn't have the capacity to detect such distance accurately. So it becomes tiny. The distance from one star to another star is not a million years of traveling in an airplane or a spacecraft. It could be millions and billions of light years, to the point that there are stars that their light reaches us and they're not here anymore. They're gone. Because the light travels and it's so far, by the time the light reaches us, they're completely gone. The stars have already gone on to the next phase in life. From our perspective, it's a davar katan, it's very small. If you would see it from close up, you would see it's humongous. It's a davar gadol. It's huge. It just depends what you see, how you see it. And he says that's one of the ideas of the metaphor that Hashem tells Avram, that your children are going to be like the stars of heaven. Everything is perspective. Sometimes you could look at yourself, and when you look at yourself from a distance, what do you see? You see a tiny little person who's insignificant and valueless. If you could look at yourself from a deeper observation and closer up, then the very same reality has tremendous significance, tremendous value, and tremendous power. It's just you're seeing it from a very, very limited vantage point. The same reality two people could see. This star is like awesome, it's unbelievable, its dimensions, its largeness, its properties. And from my perspective, it looks like a little onion. A little marble in the game, Chinese checkers. One of those little marbles.
And you're analyzing what a davar gadol is vis-a-vis a davar katan.
Yeah.
But you have to say that notwithstanding the mashal is inaccurate, that the stars are really huge. Aren't you going to say certainly that the davar gadol, you can't understand its godless?
In a chaname, for sure. That's for sure. Says the Shalah, that's pshat what the Gemara says, means davar gadol and davar katan. The way we look at Torah, even those who are a little familiar with both aspects of Torah, it looks like there's two dimensions of Torah. There's Torah's Hasad, what they call, and there's Torah's Hanigla. There's Nister and there's Nigla. Nister means the concealed, the esoteric. And some people will tell you, okay, when you start talking about these things, I shut down. Just take me back to Baba Kama and Baba Basa, Masechta Shabbos and Erevin. That's my knowledge. And then there are those who dabble inside, whether they know or they don't know, they think they know, they want to make believe they know, they would love to know, etc. For whatever the level of knowledge, but it's two completely different realms of Judaism. Which Allah says, no. It's like a mashal and a nimshal, it's the same thing. There's no nekuda in Nister that's not expressed in Nigla. And there's no nekuda in Nigla that doesn't originate in Nister. You'll say, why? It's not because it happens to be that both concepts are discussed in both places, because it's exactly the same thing. And here we come to the process, one of the most fundamental ideas in Nister, known as Seder Hishtalshelus. Literally, the order, Hishtalshelus means a chain, but it means the order of evolution. Not to confuse with evolution from the world of Darwin, the origin of species. It's a different sugya. Evolution here, we're talking about from spiritual to spiritual to spiritual to spiritual to physical. That's the evolution we're talking about. Generally, we speak about 4 worlds. Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiya. Those 4 worlds are a fundamental concept in the whole world of Pnimi Satira, in Kabbalah, in Sifrei Hashkafa, Sifrei Chassidus, Sifrei Kisvei Harizal, etc. The 4 worlds. Much before the Harizal, even the Ramah. How do people understand the 4 worlds, even if they understand it? This is the world of Asiya, and then somewhere there's a world of Yitzir, there's a world of Bria, there's a world of Atzilus. So what? If you take a spacecraft and you travel 100 billion years, you'll crash into Yitzir. And then if you go another 200 billion light years, you'll crash into Bria. And then if you'll go 100 trillion light years, you'll crash into Atzilus, and by that time, you'll become that. Or you want to say it's spiritual stuff, so it's not here or there. But the truth is that the entire perception is erroneous because the 4 worlds are not really 4 separate worlds. The 4 worlds are basically, I'm just putting it this way to be able to understand it a little better, are 4 layers of perception. It's 4 layers of consciousness. It's basically how much you see the nimshal in the mashal. How much do you see the nimshal in the mashal? Bria is a manifestation of Atzilus in a lower form, and Yitzir is a manifestation of Bria in a lower form, and Asiya is a manifestation of the above in a physical form. So I could look at the mashal and see only the mashal. In other words, I only see the outer layer, and I could look at the mashal and see the nimshal, and I could look at the mashal and I see the nimshal with even more depth and more clarity, and then I could see the mashal and see in the mashal the entire nimshal. In other words, the 2 are completely not different because the entire mashal is a reflection of the nimshal. What's the difference is the question if you're looking at it from the student's perspective or the teacher's perspective. From the student's perspective, the mashal is a mashal. I don't know the nimshal because the reason he's giving me the mashal is because I don't know the nimshal. So he's giving me the mashal. From the teacher's perspective, he started with the nimshal. He used the mashal as a way to convey the nimshal. So for him, the whole mashal's entity is nothing but a reflection of the nimshal. But from the student's perspective, I don't have the nimshal. I only have the mashal. And then I have to go with the mashal and hopefully trace it back to the nimshal, deeper and deeper and deeper and higher and higher. So therefore the Shalah says, every sugya in Gemara, all Havayas Dabai V'Rava is Ma'aseh Merkava. It is Ma'aseh Merkava. It's the working of the divine chariot. In other words, what we call a davar katan is really a davar gadol. What may seem as a little nuance, a little diuk, a little vart, a little svara, a little pasuk. Yesterday we were learning in Gemara the Pesach and the Fei about lo yimotze. If it says lecha, if it doesn't say lecha, and how that changes all the. It's a davar katan. A vart, a letter, an extra word, missing a word. It seems like a very davar katan, like the star. But if you could see it from the full, when you could see the full picture, when you could see it from close up, you could see that every one of these little stars is essentially huge. When you could see Nigla from the perspective of Ma'aseh Merkava, then you see that the smallest manifestation of a halacha is really a reflection of deep, infinite divine truth. As an illustration, I once gave you is when you write somebody an email and you're in a rush, so you put in their name in the email and you decide you're going to take out the dot. You'll take out the dot. Who needs the dot? And then you're waiting for a response and there's no response. The person says, why didn't you send me the email? I did. I just took out the dot. I was busy. What's the big deal? But the answer is that's foolish because that dot, maybe from your perspective, it's only a dot. From the back end's perspective, the programmer who created the program understood that if he gives you the full program, it's going to be overwhelming and confusing. So the representation is a simple email address that then allows this information to reach cyberspace and arrive at your doorstep or on your phone in Australia, wherever you are. But the dot is not a dot. The dot is a representation of a program that is extremely profound, extremely intense, extremely creative, and extremely powerful. What's on one level a davar katan, on another level is a davar gadol. That's pshat in Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lo yiniach davar gadol v'davar katan. So the Shalosh says, our question of why there's no Olam Haba in the Tanakh is based on a false premise. That we read the Torah in its physical language. It says because we don't read it. We are used to, right, when it says heaven and earth, what do we hear? We hear physical properties. So then we ask, why don't you talk about spiritual properties? He says maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's discussing spiritual properties, and it's just using terminology as a mashal for the nimshal, because it's really the same properties. The Ramban has an expression, HaTorah medaberes betachtoinim, v'remezes be'elyonim. The Rameh Mifanu says, HaTorah medaberes be'elyonim, v'remezes betachtoinim. It's actually talking about a spiritual reality. It's intimating, it's alluding to a physical reality. So when it says, Yosef's brothers took off his tunic and threw him into the pit, I hear, they took a person, they threw him into the pit. I see the mashal. Maybe I'll one day come to the nimshal. Maybe not. From the nimshal's perspective, it says the Torah was written before the world was created. Alpayim shana kadma Torah, there was no Yosef, there were no brothers, there was no tunic. Cain killed Hevel. I hear Cain killed Hevel. And that's true. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Samach Gimel Mikra Yotzim Edei Pshuta. But essentially, from the nimshal's perspective, it's the other way around. We're talking about metaphysical. It also happened. It's translated into a physical phenomenon, of course. Ein mikra yotzim midei pshuta. That's what I'm saying. That's what the Gemara says in Shabbos. So from the outside perspective, when I'm looking outside in, I have only the marshals. He says that's called a davar katan. If you could see it from the nimshal's perspective, and again, the nimshal itself, there may be layers and layers and layers. I told you Shlomo HaMelech had 3,000 mishalim. What's a mashal on one level is a nimshal on another level. What's a nimshal on one level is a mashal on another level. In other words, the mashal of the earth is a nimshal to a higher level of malchus, but that level of malchus is only a mashal to yet a higher level of malchus, which is only a mashal to yet a higher one. Every nimshal is also a mashal for the nimshal above it, and that nimshal becomes a mashal for the nimshal above it. All of life is like layers of an onion. You peel one layer, you just get to another layer, and they're reflective of each other. They're mirrors of each other. The more mashalim, it's because the more you want to bring it down to the davar katan. You want to bring it down to the world where it becomes tangible. So you could look at this world and see the world of Asiya. You could look at this world and see the world of Yitzira. You could look at this world and see the world of Bria. You could look at this world and see the world of Atzilus. It just means what dimension, what are you seeing inside of it? You could look at the same reality and two people see completely different things. Just like I told you, two people read musical notes. One person just sees black lines that will bore them after 2-3 seconds. And the other person in the same notes, he just sees it as musical notes. It's a mashal. He'll start singing. He'll get excited. You'll show some composers or even readers of musical notes, and you'll see them smile. You'll see them humming a song. Well, I don't understand. Why are you humming a song? Because he saw it as a keli that's capturing an oir. He saw the oir in the keli. He saw the nimshal in the mashal.
It may be a wild coincidence, but the Sheila's insight is that the Gemara is talking about Dvarim Tanim. It could have said anything. It could have said Shnai Moksum Batalis, Eruvi Shabbos, but the Lashon of Havayah is Havayah Derava. It puts the word Havayah in that thing.
You're saying Havayah is the Havayah Derava. But it's Shem Havayah coming into Elokim. Very good. There's a pirush from the Vilna Gaon in Mishlei. The pasuk says in Mishlei, Yehi mekercha baruch, usmach me'eshes nurecha. Your source should be blessed. Literally means your reproductive source should be blessed, should have a family, and enjoy the wife of your youth. That's what he's blessing him. So the Vilna Gaon says, what's the shaykhis to Mishlei? Mishlei is a sefer about Torah, about Chacham. So he says, Yehi mekercha baruch, usmach me'eshes nurecha. Torah's Hanigla has a mucker, a source. The mucker is Pnimiyas HaTorah. It's a mashal for a nimshal. So when I learn Shnayim Oichs and Betalis, two people are holding on to a cloak and they're fighting. You say you found it. I say I found it. You say it's yours. I say it's mine. So Yachloikum. Here, we're fighting about a talus, or a jacket, or a pair of pants, or a robe, whatever we're fighting about. A talus, a robe, a cloak. But that has a source. In Gan Eden, they also learn Shnai Meichs and Betalis. The Baal Shem Tov says that talus is a lavush, it's a garment. And every mitzvah is a lavush. A person dresses himself up with the divine. Shnai Meichs and Betalis, two people are fighting over a mitzvah. Zoymer ani mitzasiyah, v'zoymer ani mitzasiyah. Hamachlef para b'chamayr, it's brought in Chassidus that there's two types of animal souls. One person has an animal soul that's a cow, one person has an animal soul that's a donkey. What happens if they switch it up? They think they have they don't realize what type of animal soul they have. There's physical chametz that you have to clean up and check up on the night of before Pesach with a candle. But the Vilna Gaon says that has a mucker. The mucker is the same halacha, the same discussions in a spiritual world, from a spiritual perspective. So he says, Yehi Mekar Chabaruch. Let your source, the source of Torah, be blessed. And then, Usmach Meishes Nurecha, you'll be able to enjoy the wife of your youth. And he says, the wife of your youth represents the wife, the woman you marry when you're young. Especially in those days when they married extremely young. Extremely young. Sometimes after Bar Mitzvah, 14, 15 people got married. So he says, when a child is young, you don't raise him with pnimius. You raise him with nigla. You raise him with mishnayos, with chumash, with mishnayos, with the literal interpretation. He says, but nonetheless, when you start learning it, there's so many diyukim and meticulous insights and details that sometimes something is unsatisfactory here. Like it looks like sometimes the logic seems a little perplexing, and the focus on details seems a little perplexing. So he says, but once you'll discover the mucker at a later age, then usmach meishes nurecha, you'll find a new simcha in all the learning of your youth. Because when you'll see in nigla, the pnimius, it's going to be a different nigla. It's going to be a completely different nigla. Because you'll be able to see it as a mashal for a nimshal. It doesn't take away from the mashal. It only enhances it and gives it dimensions of depth and meaning. It's not a competition. There's a pirush according to Pshat, and then there's a pirush according to Nister. It's Hainu Hach. It's the same thing. It's just here, the spirit, the physical incarnation is seen as assuming a physical dimension, but it's really conveying a spiritual, profound idea. You'll walk into a home, so some people walk into the house and say, wow, it's a nice kitchen, it's a nice dining room, it's a nice living room. And they're impressed by, what are they impressed? They may be impressed by what just seems very elegant and very nice, exquisite. A contractor may come in, and he notices completely something else. You see, a contractor comes in the house, his eyes right away gravitate to certain words. Oh, wow, look how this person did this, and this person does this. He appreciates it. Then the architect comes in, and he appreciates it from an architect's point of view. Everybody's looking at the same exact structure. But one person can detect and see in it things that are relatable to his understanding and his level of awareness, just like when it comes to the musician with musical notes. And the same is true with every single phenomenon in life, that the mashal and the nimshal are really davar echad. It's mamish one thing. This is a mashal, this is a nimshal. The question is only which perspective of the mashal you see, and how much of the nimshal you see in the mashal. So when we speak about different worlds and different processes and higher reality and lower reality, it's really, it's not higher and lower. Really, it's not four worlds. Really, it's all one. Four worlds just means four states of consciousness that God allowed different creatures, different existences to experience based on how much tzimtzum they have to deal with, they have to confront. Because from the teacher's perspective, he just sees the nimshal everywhere. The mashal doesn't block anything. The mashal doesn't block, it doesn't conceal anything. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, lo yiniach davar gadol v'davar katan, he saw the gadol and the katan. It wasn't a katan anymore. When the katan is traced back to its source, it's a gadol. You just have to see it, be able to see it in that way, that perspective. You understand what I'm saying? Everybody understands. And that's the concept of Hishtalshalus. Hishtalshalus simply means when you're studying an apple or a watermelon, a peach, a kiwi, a grapefruit, an esrig, a lemon, whatever you're studying, whatever you're looking at, right? You're studying a flake of snow, a droplet of rain, a blade of grass, a little tiny insect crawling. I could look at the tapuach, I could look at the apple, and I see an apple, and it's true. What does it mean to live in the world of Atzilus? Not that you don't see an apple, you see the same apple. But the apple is a metaphor. The apple is a reflection. The apple is a continuum. The apple is a mirror of divine energy. Even the taste of the apple, the fact that some apples are sweet, some apples are sour, this says that the chmitzos, atapuach, the chmitzos, the zoyer, the tartness of an apple is a reflection of a particular type of divine energy. Just like the tartness of an orange and the sweetness of a grape. So I can eat the grape, and what do I feel? What do I sense? A grape. I say it's a good grape, it's not a good grape. Did I capture it? I captured the mushal, I didn't capture the nimshal. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Boirei priya eitz. It's not just saying God created the fruits of the tree. It's actually a very complicated process how that fruit happened. Usually with the partnership of a person. What you're basically acknowledging is that the Pri Ha'etz is also a reflection of Elokeinu melech haolam. Or you to drink a drug, Baba, what do you say? Shahakal niya b'dvareh. Everything comes from His word. It's a manifestation of energy. And therefore, even the color of an apple, the taste of an apple, the properties of an apple, the dimensions of the apple, the nutrients of the apple. If you dissect the apple and the apple is disintegrated in terms of what nutrients does it contain? What does it do to your body? What part of the apple does what to what part of the body? In other words, the apple on every single level. Its shape and its dimensions and its density and its color, its pigment and its taste and its its properties and its nutrients. It's all essentially a mashal for a nimshal. What does this then mean in a person's life? Imagine, a person, their whole life, they're being, the Baal Shem Tov once said that when a person feels love, when a person feels attraction, love, what is it? That's what he said. Also very daring insight. The Baal Shem Tov said that God basically wants to tell the person, I love you. I love you. I want a relationship with him. That's what he says. But he doesn't know how to speak to you because you're down here on earth. So what does he do? He channels and restricts that love through a mashal. And the mashal happens to be that you feel this attraction, you feel this excitement. It may be to this, it may be to him, it may be to her. So he says some people just grasp the mashal and they strip it from the nimshal. Really, God wants a relationship with you. And that's the chiddush. The Maggid says, I said yesterday, the Maggid says about the wife of Potiphar. The Zitcha Maggid says that it says that the wife of Potiphar was tempting Yosef again and again. Kedibra of yoim v'lo shamayla. He didn't want to be with her. Vayemoyin, he refused the shalshalas, etc. And then one day, Vayavay Abayis Elasus Malachti, and the Gemara brings in Saitel Amidvav. Rashi quotes it. There's a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. One of the opinions is that Yosef surrendered, but the last moment he saw the image of Yaakov in the window, and he abstained, and he ran away. Vayonos Vayechi hachutza. Vayazov bigdoi biyada. Vayonos Vayechi hachutza. He left his cloak in her hand, and he ran away. So she remained with the cloak, from which she proved later that he did undesirable, promiscuous things, and she put him into prison. I saw a word, the Gerer Rebbe was the Pnei Menachem, Reb Pinchas Menachem Alter, was the previous Gerer Rebbe. So I saw a word from him, he said that, it says that Parah gave Yosef a shidduch, Osnas. Who was Osnas? The daughter of Potiphar. Bas Potiphar Kohen Oin. So he asked a question. Potiphar was no saint. The wife of Potiphar was certainly no saint. She was quite a machshefes, as you can see from the story. She took an innocent man and threw him into prison for no reason. She was guilty. He was innocent. How is it that Osnas, they raised such a wonderful daughter, that he should be able to be a good shidduch for Yosef? Al pi pshat. So this is a real Polish gerech Siddush Avart. He said, because Osnas grew up with the kapota of Yosef HaTzadik in the house. The levish von HaTzadik. The kapota of Yosef HaTzadik in the house was taka a torn kapota. It was torn. It was a kapota from Yosef. He said there was a kedusha in the house. A wort in the Pnei Menach. A Polish wort. Geschmack wort. So, which kapota?
No, it's two different.
That was their Shulkin.
That was the Shtreimel. That was the Shtreimel. We're talking about the kapota. Vayazav big de biyad up, a shade of art, yeah?
My kids would kill me if I said such a word.
Yeah, no, for good reason, maybe. The truth is, even in Chabad, they wouldn't say such a word. But in Poland, they said these words.
Didn't she steal it?
Vayonos.
The Kedusha comes, so she had an obligation to return it.
Possession of
They once asked Reb Meir Shapiro, the Lubliner Rav, the Hervich Lubliner, what's the difference? What's the difference of a chassid, yeah, and a litvak? They asked him. So he said, in those days there were differences still. So he said that they both learned the Gemara in Sukkah that Yonasan ben Uziel is learning, and while he learns, every bird that flies over him gets burnt. So he says, the chassid says, wow, such a kedusha satira, as a fire, that a bird is flying over and gets consumed in the flame of Yonasan ben Uziel's Torah. So that's one person learning. His chavrusa says, 1 second, is he chayav to pay for it? Is he chayav to pay for the bird or not? That's what I want to know. Is he chayav or not? Dinner de garmi, dinner de garmei. It's not so poshut. And if he knew that he's going to learn Torah and there's going to be such a fire, is it a berber shusarabim? V'chuli v'chuli, a lot of questions. Chatzi nezek shalom, that happened the first time, the third time. So the Maggid says, this is al derech hatzachas, but the Maggid says that Potiphar's wife was beautiful and Yosef was beautiful. Yefei Torah v'yefei Mara. Vayovei habai salasis malachta, Yosef felt, that's what the Gemara says, that Yosef, however you explain it, he felt some gravitational pull. He felt some meshicha. The muzdi yoiknor shel Yaakov avivra. How did the image of Yaakov help him to abstain? He didn't know what Yaakov looked like before. He grew up with Yaakov. He always knew what Yaakov looked like. He sees Yaakov's image, the Zohar says, and he abstains. So the Gemara says that Yaakov gave him a message. Zohar just says he saw Yaakov's image. Rashi also says v'chulu. So the Maggid teaches alpinista, alpipnemius, Yaakov is midas hatiferes. Yaakov is the quality of beauty, splendor. So Yosef said, what do I need a mashal? I'm going to go to the nimshal. I'll have much more of it. I'm going to go to the source of the mashal. Potiphar's wife has a beauty, but all beauty in the world is a mashal for a nimshal. He traced it back to Yaakov Aviv, and he embraced that. So he didn't crush the feature in him of love and attraction. He just wanted the nimshal instead of the mashal. Not detach the mashal from the nimshal. Now I should just emphasize that in life, this entire beautiful shir doesn't always work. Sometimes you gotta just run away without all these titles. Because if you start with pilpul, if you're Yosef HaTzadik, you may end up where Yosef did. But if not, the mashal, the nimshal, and you won't know what hit you. So it's very nice to be sophisticated when you're in a calm mood. At a moment of passion, a person just has to be able to say, like the Shinavir Rav in Divrei Yecheskel says, why the Vayemoyin has a shalshelas? Because Yosef looked at her and said, nay, 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 boom. Shalshelas. If he didn't get it once, I'll say it, nay, nay, nay. Of course, he said it in Yiddish, probably.
Aren't these Maamarim written
for the person to say that he too can reach such a level?
Yes, but I'm just saying, in a moment when your passion is overtaking you and overwhelming you, you have to be honest with yourself.
Don't try this at home.
In other words, if you start saying, "Oh, it's really a mushal for a nimshal, let me get the nimshal," in other words, you indulge it in any possible way, it could be a tremendous trap of the Yetzer Hara. You have to know where you are when you are. In other words, from a reflective point of view, it's true, it gives perspective. At a moment of passion, you have to have the mechanism to be able to simply be stubborn. You have to be stubborn. You can't be sophisticated, because if you become sophisticated, you could fall. That's pshat. Vayazov bigdoi biyada, vayonos vayetze hachutza. Bigdoi is a lavush. Yosef left the mashal, the lavush, by her. Vayonos vayetze hachutza, and he went out to be able to reach the infinity of Tiferes. Like the Gemara compares the hachutza of Potiphar's wife with the hachutza of Hashem taking Avram and saying, "Come hachutza, go out of your stars," and he picked him up higher than the stars of heaven. He took him also hachutza, and the Chazal compared the two hachutzos. Vayazov bigdoi biyada. Beged is a mashal, a lavush. So the lavush of love he left by her. Vayonas vayetze hachutza. He went out to transcend it, to touch Yaakov Avinu's Tiferes. That's pshat mus de yochno shal Yaakov Aviv ra b'chaloin, in the window. He had to lift himself up and see it from Yaakov's perspective. In other words, Torah is never coming to try to crush a person's enjoyment. Rather, it's here to come to develop one's taste buds, that when you're eating an apple, or you're eating an orange, or whatever you're eating, you should be able to experience more of it, not less of it. When we speak about eating l'shem shamayim, eating with consciousness, with the right consciousness, mindfulness, and so forth, right? So people think there is enjoying life, and then there's Judaism. That's one of the greatest mistakes that people make, that forces people to pit a good life versus a Jewish life, a real Jewish life. So my brother, my father, my zayd, my uncle, they're fachnokte people. It works for them. You know what fachnok means? I don't know how to translate it.
So Marcus.
They're fakvetch, they're fahak, that's an English word. Fakvetch and fahak are two English words. They're good. It's good for them. They're in the heavens. They're in the skies. But I like the real world. I like the real world. So therefore, it's not for me. But this comes all from the pirut, from the fragmentation we create between the mashal and the nimshal. It's exactly the other way around. In order to be able to fully enjoy the world, in order to be able to suck the marrow out of the world, out of life, you want to see the mashal as a mashal for a nimshal, not detached. When you detach the mashal from the nimshal, you're actually not getting the mashal even, because the whole mashal is only a mashal for the nimshal. So the Baal Shem Tov says, if you want the love, you got to tune in to the source of the love. If you're not tuning into the source of love, it's going to be skin deep, which is why you see, the more you strip the gashmi from the ruchni, the more temporary it is. It's a fast high. Take even food, and certainly as Rashi says, halechem asher oichel is not referring to food, it's referring to intimacy. But it's also about food. Take food. The more you could see in the food, the nimshal, the more you'll actually enjoy the meal. The less you will, it's going to be instant gratification. You're starving, so you grab the piece of meat or whatever it is. It's called fressing in English, or some other languages, but the concept is the same, and you're done. And then fakert, a person is full, and you give them more food. They want. It's horrible. When 5 minutes ago this was Mashiach, that's 5 minutes ago. Suddenly Mashiach is now disgusting, because the whole Messiah of the food was just because I'm starving. Now it's over. The more the mashal connects with the nimshal, it has an eternal quality. It has a timeless quality. It's nurturing on many levels, physically and also emotionally. But this is the avoid of connecting the mashal to the nimshal. The same is true with the other type of bread, intimacy. The more intimacy is stripped from its nimshal, the more skin deep it is, the more short-lived it is. It seems to be hot and passionate and exciting and stimulating, but every honest person knows, a few minutes later, boom, the ear is gone, the excitement is gone, and then the person, it's an empty feeling.
How does that analysis square with Yosef putting his hands in the, remember the Gemara, Yosef after
Yeah.
his death. How does that work?
Okay, that's another sugi. He's saying about the sugi in Saita, what Yosef did with his fingers, not Sipain of Bakarka.
The passion has to be connected to
Yeah.
the Yibshul.
Yeah.
So was he doing that when he was
Yeah, and that's what we spoke about yesterday with Shir Hashirim. That the Chiddush of Shir Hashirim is not that physical passion and spiritual passion are two worlds. There's heavenly passion, and then there's earthly passion, real passion. It's not two worlds. That's what Rabbi Akiva said. Al toimru mayim mayim. Why not? Because mayim means there's two mayims. Lo hoya ha'olam kedai. When one realizes the truth of the olam, the world is a better place. The worldly passion is real passion because it's passion that is a reflection of infinite passion. I'll finish with a story. It's already late. They say that the Baal Shem Tov used to daven long, and there was a Jew who would come in every morning to watch the Baal Shem Tov's davening. And he was an alcoholic. First an alcoholic, and lived in Mezhebush in the Ukraine. And like other people in the Ukraine and even in America, he liked what they used to call in Yiddish a bittere troppen. He loved drinking. And he would come to the Baal Shem Tov's davening and he would watch it and observe it. And after davening, he would go drink and he was smashed for the rest of the day. They once asked him, why do you just go drink in the morning? So he said that after the Baal Shem Tov's davening, the drink has a whole different flavor, a whole different taste. Why? Because the Baal Shem Tov's davening had such a bren to it, such a passion, such a yearning and thirst. So he says this triggers in him a whole different level of thirst. And then when he goes to drink, it's satiating. What is he talking about? He was a deep fellow, like many addicts. His depth just didn't have kalim to live a productive life, but he was a deep person. He knew that every taiva in the world, as strong as it is limited. Even the taiva to alcohol. And those who have a taiva to it, I don't know, I never had a chush in it, but those who have a taiva to it say it's unbelievable, like other bali taivas and other things. Every taiva, by definition, is limited. The Baal Shem Tov's davening had a quality of bli gvul to it, had a quality to infinity to it. By the Baal Shem Tov's davening, he allowed his taiva to gain fuel from an infinite thirst. So then when he went to drink, it was satisfying a much profounder thirst, which is why people who become addicted to cravings, they always have to up the bar. Yesterday's drug is not enough for today, because yesterday's high came from the newness, but today it's already old stuff. So I always need more and more and more and more. I always have to stimulate it through artificial, increasing, incremental increases in order to be able to satisfy it. This is an illustration. So the person, however, he says the Baal Shem Tov, his davening touched on the infinite, because it was connected to Hashem, the source of infinity. So by hanging around there, his taiva was elevated to a different place. So Mela, his drinking was satisfying something else. What's the message here? The message here is, it's a very profound idea in life, that very often a person is fueling, getting their fuel from infinity. And that's what's driving it. The sad thing is that it gets stuck in the gullus of his addiction rather than tuning into the source.
A question about this little parentheses where he says here. It sounds like saying something which you referred to before. In other words, the mashpia has a tremendous gain because the mushpa only sees it from the concrete example, but it can't trace backward. But he's saying the mashpia, by virtue of his ability to give a mushal that goes all the way down from your tzilas down to everything, so he sees the whole path going forward. So he has like a mile. He has the advantage.
Because the mushal grows out from the nimshal. So there's no concealment.
So therefore, he's able to see the whole pathway. That's his beauty.
It's from inside out, not from outside in. It's like the person who's writing the music notes.
Right.
I'm writing the music
He
notes.
also gets to hear the music. They said, right.
For me, the notes are just an expression of my music. When I read it, I don't see any of
So
this.
he has a real mind.
Yeah.
This Nikud that we're speaking about so much, this traces back historically to the first Hasidic year we had 3 years ago. It was a Maamar of Purim.
Chayev
It was
inish
Kasher-
l'tzumah b'Purim.
And it was Kasher Moshel HaKadmoni. And
But
it shows us
Torah.
we also always go back to Moshel HaKadmoni. Same.
Yeah.
And you spoke to about Hillel and Bachluk's and Hillel.
Shammai,
and
B'koyach
Each
and
one has
B'koyach. They
same
trace it
idea.
back, yeah.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.